Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me all right? Great. Thanks for having me. Your Professor Jack asked me to talk about my history in game development, and so what I thought I'd do is I'd actually give a history of me, but I would chronicle it, my life according to video games. So I was born in 1970, and in 1970, the first games weren't even on monitors. So there was actually no visuals associated with games. So that thing on the far, on my far right there, was a thing called a teletype. And when you wanted to play a game, it actually would happen on pieces of paper. And you would enter the command you wanted to do, like go forward, backwards, right, left, attack, open, close, whatever, and then you would wait while the result of your command printed on a piece of paper. So there was no monitor. It was all happening on pieces of paper. And my business partner, a guy named Richard Garriott, his first few games were written on that kind of machine on pieces of paper with no monitor. A few years later, in like 1972, is when the first video games that actually had graphics, and that's the thing you see in the middle there. That's what the first kinds of video games, and that's actually the first 3D graphics right there, where there was what was called orthographic projection. That's where you're simulating near and far distance objects. So that's the first 3D graphics right there in 1973. A little bit about me. And you'll see this theme repeat itself, and it's actually one of the things I want to impart to you guys. Part of what you're here at the university for, and what you've gone and gotten an education your entire lives is some of it's about learning facts, but really the whole reason you're in any kind of education system is not about learning things. It's about learning to learn, and that's really one of the benefits I got growing up. Was I grew up to learn. So my dad was an art and antiques dealer, but he also happened to have a degree in microbiology and in English, and he had done some English teaching, but his career that he chose for himself was to be an art and antiques dealer. And then my mom, she was a research librarian, and she was also a serial volunteer. So that means she basically would volunteer everything at the local library, at the the local homeless shelter. She would do a lot of volunteering. But what was amazing for me is whenever I would express interest in anything, and as any child, my interest would change constantly. But I would say, I like rocks and fossils, and so and both my mother and father would facilitate that in different ways. For my mom, what that meant is I would come home the next day from preschool or school, and there would be a stack of books as tall as me about fossils or rocks or whatever it is. And for my dad, what that meant was, like, I would go with him on one of his shopping things for his store, and while we were doing that, we would make time to look for things that were related to rocks or fossils, and consequently, by the age of like 10, I had probably one of the largest fossil collections of any 10-year-old I knew. I mean, just gazillions of them. But what this taught me very early was, if you were interested in something, start acquiring information and knowledge about it, and not just a little bit, but a lot, and it's not enough to just be interested in something. You need to be interested in and learn as much as you possibly can about it. And this is especially important with anything related to technology, because technology changes really, 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 really quickly. And if you're not constantly learning about it, you're gonna fall behind. So now we're in the 80s. So now I'm in my I'm 10 and older, and I got my first gaming console, which was the Atari 2600, which was that guy up in the I'm pointing in the upper left right there. It's an amazing piece of technology. It had color graphics. So the 1980s is really when we first had color graphics for the first time, and that's when not only on the computer, but we had home consoles with the Atari 2600, ColecoVision, things like that, and this was really kind of a renaissance as far as video games and consumers were concerned, because this is when coin-operated video games really exploded as well. For me, this is really when I decided that I wanted to go into acting. And so that lasted until I got into college and I started auditioning for things, and I didn't really get cast a lot. As with many people in theater, it's like, oh, well, you don't get cast, so you move into technical theater. I ended up getting a degree in lighting and set and sound design and stage management. And my plan was that I was going to turn that into a graduate degree, and then I was going to go work in, the big city. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, I grew up in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was going to move to like a big city, Chicago, New York, LA, work in the theater there. And I did really accelerated, heavy course load. I didn't take breaks during the summer. I kept taking classes during the summer. I was on a scholarship, a work-study scholarship, so I was actually working at the university in the theater shop, building sets as part of my scholarship. And so I heavily in school. So by the time I got my bachelor's degree, I really wanted some time off. So I had some friends who lived here in Austin, and Austin seemed like a fun town to take a break. So I said, I'm going to take a break from school before I go to graduate school, and I'm going to, do some work in community theater to keep my, hand in the theater game, and that's probably enough to make a living for a little while I, I'll take a year off and do lights for my friend's band, so I'm still doing some light stuff, and that'll be fun. And turns out I absolutely could not make a living, and was not getting enough food to eat. And then there was, and now it's the 1990s, right? So 92 is when I graduated, and now there's, we've got like, this is when Nintendo has come out. There's Doom has come out. Like lots of amazing things. Tetris, lots of amazing things are happening in the 90s. And at this point, I had never actually realized or thought about the fact that, I played video games, but I never thought about the fact that people actually made video games. I never made this sort of connection of like, well, I thought about people made movies, and I was in theater, and I obviously thought about the fact that people worked in plays and made plays and worked behind the scenes, but I never actually made this sort of connection of like, well, probably people do the same thing in video games. They work behind the scenes just like I work behind the scenes in theater. I decided I needed, I wasn't making ends meet with theater here in Austin, and I was like, oh, I need a real job. I'm looking through the wanted ads, and I see this ad that said video game testers wanted. And the irony, of course, is that I was looking for a real job, and then I saw one of the first things I see is a video game testers wanted. And and I show this to my friends, and they're like, that absolutely cannot be real. And I remember distinctly because we're in their house. This is the band. Like I was living with a band, by the way. It's a very Austin experience. So I'm living with my friends who are in a band. We're at their house, drinking, playing Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers, and they're like, that cannot be real. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably some like psychology department experiment at UT. They probably just want to see what kind of person would show up to this, and I'll show up, and there's going to be a guy, there's going to be some grad students in lab coats checking off, like, okay, so we want to ask you some personality questions, but it was a real job. Like I show up, and what was interesting is the job did not say the name of the company. It just said video game testers wanted, and that's literal, and it gave an address, which turned out to be a temp agency, but it didn't say the company that that you would work for. And even when I went for the interview, they still didn't tell me the name of the company or the games that I'd be working on or anything like that. It wasn't until the temp agency, well, first of all, so I get to the temp agency and it's like, no, this is a real job. You're really going to be testing video games. And I'm like, this sounds great. I'm like, I'm still thinking this can't be real, but okay, great. Sounds awesome. So I show up for and then they tell me it's going to be at this company called Origin Systems. And which I had played their games. I had played Ultima. I had played Wing Commander. I was like, I had already been thinking this can't be real. This is too good to be true. And then I had known these games. These were very, famous games in nerd world, which I lived in. And so I was very, very excited. And I show up and that was my job. I tested video games. And at this point, there was still some hope that I might go back to school and do theater. That after about 2 weeks of testing video games and working at this company, I was employee 36 at Origin Systems here in Austin, and I decided that after about 2 weeks of this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like I really wanted to be making video games. Like there was nothing else that I could imagine better. And I had played games my entire life. Like everything from playing board games with family, playing video games at home, and so I loved games. I thought they were an amazing thing. Video games especially. And the guy who ran this company is this crazy man, Richard Garrett, and he is kind of the definition of eccentric millionaire. As I mentioned, he made his very first game when he was in high school on paper tape as a project in 1979, and then went on to make one of the very first commercial computer role-playing games sold on a Ziploc bag where his mom did the art, and then ended up selling his company to Electronic Arts. He's since gone to space and gone to Antarctica, gone down to the Titanic. He knows how to have fun with his money. And at this point in the game industry, this is 1992 when I started, everything was done basically with sheer force of will. I mean, because basically everyone involved in the game industry was sort of creative types, misfits. Nobody really had ever thought that, hey, maybe we should read a book about project management, or maybe we should, think about milestones and schedules. No, it's let's just put bunk beds in our offices and work till we pass out, and then wake up and work some more. And I mean, that's literally, when I showed up, there were literally bunk beds next to the kitchen, and that's how we got things done. Is we just work till we passed out. And so I had, with my degree in theater, part of my degree is I had studied stage management, which is a lot of organizing creative types, and which is keeping the actors okay, no, you got to go this way. No, I know you're very excited and you're in character, but no, for a moment you need to get out of character and then get on stage right when you're supposed to, and then you can be in character. So a lot of being a stage manager is working with creative types and keeping them, it's the herding cats thing. So a lot, even in QA, I looked around and said, can we do this better? Can we get organized? Can we not just do this as wacky, creative, misfit types? Can we actually be organized and thoughtful and run this as a real business, not just as a sheer force of will, creative, artistic commune type thing? So that's how I got started. And I ended up making a lot of noise about doing it better. I was notorious for, I wouldn't just write up a bug about a certain part of the game. I would write these long treatises about, well, the jumping puzzle is broken, but the real problem is the jumping puzzle is in the wrong place, and here's why. But even if we solve that problem, the real problem is that we're doing this all wrong. And then I would go and track down the producer on the project and corner him in his office, and they're like, oh no, it's that guy again. And then I would corner him and tell him all this stuff too. So eventually he gave up and let me move into development and out of QA. So So real quick, I want to take a break to ground you guys on where technology is at this point. So I found this great picture on a website called Meme Blender. 1993, those are all the things that you needed to do what you could do with the object in your pocket right now. Okay? And just to give you guys a little perspective, so my very first project, so I got to move out of QA, and my very first project was a project called Ultima Online. And this was the very first, it wasn't the very first massively multiplayer game, but it was the very first one to move into a very large, commercially successful. The largest game, online game that had ever been done before had about 30,000 users ever. And we were the one, well, first we coined the term massively multiplayer, coined the term shards, and I'll talk about all that in a second. But what really inspired me was a game called Doom. And believe it or not, an ancient Egyptian game called Senet, which is one of the first games that we know of that was a multiplayer game. It was 2 players. It's an early form of backgammon. It's one of the few games that we have a record of the actual rules of 2 players playing together. And the reason I credit Senet is I credit it because of multiplayer games. And why I say that is that I think games, as part of their fundamental structure and their DNA, really are meant to be social experiences. And I think games can also be solo experiences, and I think they can, but when games are solo experiences, they're really more narrative experiences. Games as solo experiences are more akin to watching a movie, reading a book. But games as interactive experiences really originally were social experiences. They were structures where people could come together and interact with each other. And so for me, taking games and making them multiplayer is an expression of something that's fundamental to the DNA of games. And for me, being at Origin, Ultima was this beloved role-playing game that up until I got there had been a single-player experience. Ironically, it was a single-player experience that had been built around replicating the founder of the company, Richard's experience of playing Dungeons and Dragons. So all the characters in your party, so you had a party of characters that would follow you around, were all people that he had played Dungeons and Dragons together with. So they're all based on his friends that he had been in the SCA and played Dungeons and Dragons together. But they were computer-controlled characters. And so so my thing was like, well, they shouldn't be computer-controlled characters, they should be real people. But up until this point, the technology absolutely really could not facilitate it because we were bandwidth limited. And the people's access to the internet was pretty severely limited, and not enough people were doing it. There were really only tens of thousands of people using the internet, and the World Wide Web had not even launched yet. So the World Wide Web launched in '95, and I joined the company in '92. So people didn't even have web pages yet. So get that in your head. No web pages. Imagine a world with no web pages. All right, so that little white and black box up in the upper left is a modem. Okay, that was the device you needed to. So it's like the closest equivalent for you guys right now would be your router that the cable company comes and installs in your house. And most people at the time that we were building Ultima Online had a 14.4 modem, which gives you 14.4 kilobits per second. So just so you understand the math behind that, LTE gives you 12 megabits per second. So that's 12,288 kilobits per second, and that's beamed through the air. So a 14.4 modem was a hard line, okay? So what you get through the air on your phone was 12,000 times more bandwidth than what we were able to get people our game. And so that led to some really challenging problems for us. So for instance, when we wanted to beta test our game, we couldn't, people literally could not download the game. And we had not budgeted for this. So we had no way to get people the game to test it for us. And so we were like, we have to charge people to play the beta. So we said, okay, well, there's a sign-up page, and it'll cost $5 to play the beta. And we're like, oh God, we're screwed. Like there's no way anyone's going to pay for this. You know, fast forward now, people are paying for early access, but that's a whole other thing. And meanwhile, Electronic Arts, our parent company, is telling us we don't believe in this internet thing. We don't think the World Wide Web is going to amount to much. Multiplayer gaming is kind of a fad. And we think that 30,000 people is like the maximum that anyone would ever play a multiplayer game. We had 50,000 people sign up to pay $5 to play the beta in 16 hours. But we had to do that because we had to mail them the CD because the game was too big to download. The smallest app on your phone is 10 times bigger than our game. So that's the kind of technology we had to work with. An iPhone 7 has a 2.23 gigahertz processor. The fastest computer that people had at the time that we launched is a 233 megahertz processor. So 1,000 times slower than what your phone has. So that's the kind of technology we were working with back in '97. So Ultima Online, real quick, it's one of the very first MMORPGs. In fact, we coined that term. We coined the term rares. We coined the term shards, which is what is the term used for servers. And the real funny side story about shards, Richard, the founder of the company, always wants to insist that there's a fictional explanation for everything. And when we were originally launching the game, we didn't think we were going to need multiple servers because we were told we weren't going to be very successful. So we thought everybody was going to be on one server because there was never going to be more than 1,000 people online at any given time. And then we quickly realized we need multiple servers. And so we came up with this fictional explanation that went back to the very first Ultima, where there was this gem that was shattered at the end when you killed the bad guy. And the fiction was that that gem captured an image of the world. And when that gem was shattered, there were thousands of little versions of alternate versions of the world. And each one of those shards is another version of the world, which is a server. And what's funny is shards is not only used now for game servers, it's actually used in database. It's used by database programmers. It refers to instances of databases, and got into this fun argument with a database programmer who told me, no, that's a database term, has nothing to do with gaming. And then I had to show him the intro video of Ultima Online. He was like, oh, guess I'm wrong. All right, we were the first MMO to have player housing. We were the first subscription-based model, and it's still running today. So Ultima Online is the longest commercial running MMO ever. So we launched in '97. People are still playing it. Cannot believe it, but people are still playing it. And it's 2D graphic tiles. Craziness. All right, 2000s. Now things like Grand Theft Auto, Elder Scrolls, City of Heroes, World of Warcraft. So that's probably the MMO most of you are familiar with, not the granddaddy like Ultima Online. So after Ultima Online, Electronic Arts wanted us to make a sequel because Electronic Arts, that's what they do. Madden. There's a new Madden every year. And we tried to convince them that online games don't really work that way with sequels, like you just keep investing in the current one and do expansions to it. But they convinced us to do, they browbeat me basically into doing a sequel, which they ended up canceling, so we left. And then we formed a new company called Destination Games, and then we got acquired by a Korean company called NCSoft, who does Lineage 2, Aeon. And so we formed their North American headquarters, worked on a game called Tabula Rasa, shipped it too early, ended up tanking. But while we were there, we also helped them with Guild Wars and City of Heroes. And then, after that, moved on and did a major career shift, and I went to Disney. So completely different shift for me. So And this was bizarre. So I thought Electronic Arts was a big company. Electronic Arts had 3,000 employees. Disney has 30,000 employees. For me, Ultima Online, I felt was kind of a once in a career type opportunity to kind of help invent an entire genre. But the kind of pitch they gave me at Disney was that I was going to build a platform, this platform called Disney Connected Learning, that was going to give game designers the ability to connect curriculum to game events and then build a reporting platform. Well, in fact, I'll show you the next slide. So, that then parents could see what their kids were learning inside these games and then be able to give their kids gifts in the games. So we had top learning experts build a curriculum. Then we built some games that used that curriculum. We had an assessment engine that would catch the events as the kids unlocked these levels or did prove that they had demonstrated those things. And then we built an app in Facebook where parents could see what their kids were learning in those games, and they could give them coins or extra lives and things like that. And we built a prototype in Club Penguin, and we built some mobile apps. And then Disney decided that they didn't want to do educational stuff, and they just wanted to do entertainment stuff. And then I left. And now we're coming up about where we are here. Again, contrast and now we're where I am now. So Richard called me right after I left Disney. I was doing some consulting work, and Richard said, "Hey, we're about to do this Kickstarter. We're basically going to do Ultima Online again, but with modern technology, and would you be interested in helping us out?" And I said, "That sounds pretty cool. I can't do it right now, but if the Kickstarter is successful, let's talk." So the Kickstarter was successful, so they asked for $1 million. They raised almost $2 million in April of 2013. We are now the second. After the Kickstarter, we've continued to raise money directly through our website and through Steam Early Access. We are now the second highest crowdfunded game of all time. We've raised $10.5 million directly from players. No investments, no publisher. We do open development and crowdsourcing, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more how that works. And players have been able to access the game since November of 2013. So the same year we did the Kickstarter, we started letting people play the game. And it's built in Unity for the client and Photon for the backend. And the way we develop is what we call co-development. And there's 3 core concepts to that: transparency, cadence, and a feedback loop. And when I talk about transparency, I'm talking about sausages. You're like, what? Wait, what? Otto von Bismarck, who was a German general, had this great quote that said, "Law and sausages are 2 things you do not want to see being made. No one should see how laws or sausages are being made. To retain respect for either one, you must not watch them being made. The making of laws, like the making of sausages, is not a pretty sight." So one of the very first things I did when I joined the team after the Kickstarter was I made this post on the forums. And the reason I made this post on the forums to the players is what I wanted to tell the players is we're going to be very transparent with you. We are going to show you what game development is like. We're going to let you play the game really early. We're going to tell you, we're going to change things a lot. But by the way, game development's really ugly. Things change a lot. And things you thought were going to happen one way are not going to happen that way. And so you don't want to know how sausages are made. You probably don't want to know how games are made either. So what does transparency mean for us? So on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis, we put out updates. What that means on a daily basis is we're an agile studio, and we have what's called stand-ups. And stand-ups are a daily meeting where team members literally stand in a room, and we stand because if you sit down, you talk too long. And so we sit down, we stand up, and then each person goes around, they say what they worked on the day before, what they're gonna work on today, and if they're blocked or not. We take notes from those meetings, and we post those to our forums every day. So every single day, our backers know what every single member of the team is working on. And the reason that's important to us is we want our players, who are our backers, who have paid for this, we want them to know where every single dollar is going on every single day. On a weekly basis, we put out a weekly update that shows things we're working on. It highlights certain areas of the game that are being worked on. It highlights certain community members, what they've been doing. On a monthly basis, we put out a release, which I'll talk about later in more detail. And then on a quarterly basis, we put out a schedule update that talks about what we're going to work on in the next quarter. We have public forums and IRC. We are on the forums every single day. I'm personally on the forums every single day, at least 2 to 3 hours, listening to and responding to players. Even if I'm not answering questions directly, I'm at least posting saying, I hear what you're saying. Like I said, we provide scheduling, funding, and staffing details. And what's interesting is players even if we don't provide exact details, players can use the details we provide to fill in the gaps. So for instance, players have built a Google spreadsheet based on the following data to know what our runway is. So they took the IGDA, that's the International Game Developers Association, annual salary survey information, and they use that coupled with our daily stand-up notes, so they know how many artists we have, how many designers we have, how many programmers we have, and they use that with the salary, that salary survey information. They use that to calculate what our burn rate is, and then we show on our front page what our current funds are, and then they use that versus that salary survey information, our stand-up notes, to know what our runway is. And they're usually about a month or 1 to 3 months accurate on that. One very important thing is we don't require our players to sign any kind of NDAs. So when they're playing the game, they can stream to Twitch, they can post videos to YouTube. The only thing we ask of them is that they acknowledge the fact that we're still in early access. We help that slightly by putting in big yellow letters "early access" on the top of the screen, so that helps a little bit. So in addition to transparency, we believe very strongly in cadence. So we have daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly updates, like I mentioned. The biggest, most important one, though, is the monthly updates to the game. These are one of the things we decided very early on is that when those updates came out was much more important than what was in them. And what I mean by that is, on a quarterly basis, we tell the players what's going to come up in the next 3 months. So it's a list of deliverables that they can expect in these monthly updates. And the day before this month's update, and the updates come out on the 10:30 a.m. on the last Thursday of the month. And the day before the update goes out, I post and I say, here's what's going to be in that update. And any deliverables that don't make the update, I strike through and I say, hey, this deliverable isn't going to make it. But I always explain why. And I say, this deliverable is not going to make it because we had to work on this other thing. But then I list all the things that we are going to deliver or the things that we worked on instead. But I make sure to leave in that original deliverable, and I just strike through the things so we make sure that we're not hiding anything. And again, we could have chosen to go a different model where we held the monthly update until we delivered all those things we originally said. But what we've experienced is that having that reliability of knowing that they're always going to get that update on that Thursday morning at the end of the month was much more reliable, much more encouraging for the users, gave them a much more steady feeling, and it also resulted in better funding for us as well. Those updates include everything from new content to bug fixes to polish, and we see direct correlation between when those updates go out and what our funding is. So we always see an increase in funding when those updates go out. And so transparency, cadence, and then the last one is a feedback loop. And that feedback loop is fed through iteration. And that's what those monthly updates are for. The monthly updates are for us to iterate on the game and make it slightly better every single month. And the way we iterate is we take basically two data sets. One is subjective data. And subjective data is all the things that players are telling us on the forums. I like this, I don't like that. We take that data set and we couple it with objective data. So we measure everything in the game. Every single activity a player does in the game, we measure, and it goes into a database. And so every spell they cast, every object they make, every object they pick up, every object they destroy, every creature they kill, every time they swing a sword, we measure all of that. And the reason we do that is because often what they say they like or do not like, or what they say is broken or what they say is not working, has absolutely no relation to what is actually happening. Like they'll say, oh, well, all of the magical punch spells are too weak. And we'll go, oh, okay, well, let's look at that. And then we'll go look at all those and like, Flaming Fist is the most used spell. It is used more than every other magical ability combined in the game. And it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's because it's instant and it doesn't use any of your mana, your magical mana. It's like, oh, but it's super weak and we should make it stronger. So if we had listened to what they said and not gone and looked at the data, then all of a sudden everyone would have been running through the game and be able to one-hit punch everything with their Flaming Fist, and the game would have been completely destroyed. So you always have to listen to what they say, but then go and look at your objective data and make sure that what they're saying is what's actually happening. And one of the things I do to facilitate this feedback loop and this iteration is when I'm building our schedule, I allocate 30%, or I don't allocate 30% of our schedule so that we have room to respond to feedback from the previous release. So when I'm building out our schedule, there's literally 30% of each person's schedule that is left blank, so we have room to respond to feedback from the previous release. And then finally, a really big thing for us is recognizing contributions from our community and from our players. And some of this is very formalized and also monetized. And what I mean by that is there's two levels to this. So when players do something outstanding for the community, we want to recognize that. And so Richard came up with a couple of interesting ideas. So one of them is this medal that you see in the lower left corner. And he stole, and this plaque actually, and he stole both these ideas from England. So England has two things that they use to recognize. One is the OBE, the Order of the Britannian Empire, which is a knighthood, and the other one is a royal warrant. In our game, the world you go to is New Britannia. So we have the Order of the New Britannian Empire, and we have the Royal Warrant of New Britannia. And in our game, if you are an outstanding community member who's done something great for the game, like you ran a particular wonderful event or you've helped new players consistently, then you as an individual will get this ONBE, Order of the New Britannian Empire, which includes a little medal that your character can wear. It includes a title that you could display above your head. But we actually made the physical medal that we mail to you, or if we see you in person at an event, that we actually pin on you, and you can wear it around. So there's a physical, real world aspect and the digital one. Same with this royal warrant. So if you have a group in the game that does something good for the game and the community, we give you this plaque, and what it represents is you have done something that is sanctioned by us that affects the community. And the very first one we awarded was for these guys, the Bards of the Poets Circle. And they got it by first telling us we suck. And they told us we suck because as a crowdfunded game, we were being very careful with our money, so all the music in the game, except for one, the intro song, we downloaded for free. So we were like, hey, let's find some free medieval sounding music and we'll use that. Well, you get what you pay for, and they were right, the music sucked, it was terrible. And they were like, this music is awful, can we please fix it? And we're like, well, okay, if you can do better, sure. And so they started submitting music to make the game better. And the first few pieces they submitted were not very good. Well, it wasn't that they weren't good. They just didn't sound like medieval music. They had like synthesizers and things like that. And it totally didn't fit. Terrible. Rejected them. So they were like, well, why are you rejecting them? So they got together with Richard. Richard said, well, I want everything to sound like it could have been made on a period instrument. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we got it. We'll start doing that, so make it sound. So they did their own Kickstarter so that they could get equipment to make music that would sound like that, including trying to get some period instruments or synthesizers that were capable of doing samples that could sound that way. And they formed this guild, the Bards of Poets Circle. And they then formed this vetting process where people would submit music to them. They would vet it before it got to us. And then they would submit it to us. And they have 100% success rate now when they submit it to us. We then pay them for it. So we have a bounty sheet. So we pay different levels depending on the song. Some are non-exclusive. Some are mutually non-exclusive, so that like they can sell it, we can sell it. Some are exclusive only to the game, so we pay more for those. And they got a royal warrant, meaning that if you want to put music in the game, if you want to sell music to us to put in the game, you go through those guys because they have the royal warrant. And we have a similar royal warrant for people who want to submit NPC conversations to the game or books to the game. Any of the crowdsourcing thing, we issue royal warrants for that. We've also done royal warrants for people who run events in the game, etc. And the same thing, there's a digital version of this that you can hang on your virtual house in the game, but we actually send you the physical plaque that you can hang on your real house. And speaking of real things, we like to do real world events. So everything from at certain levels of back, like if you pay a certain level back the project, you can come do a studio tour, do round tables. Our players love to run these LARPing events where they're like big mass battles. We even did a stretch goal when we were hitting like the 2.1 million where Richard and I, Dark Starr and Lord British, would fight to the death, and the loser would have to go in the lake. That's the lake behind us. It's hard to kind of make out. We didn't really fight to the death. They were foam swords. Turns out Richard fenced in college, and in the SCA. I never did any of that. He's much better than me, so I obviously was losing. And so in the last round, it was 3 rounds. In the last round, I threw down my sword. I grabbed him and I just threw us both in the water. Because my character is chaos, so that fits. And the reason we do these real world events is the same reason we do the metal, is that we feel like having those ties to the real world helps tie people to the game more than if everything was just virtual. And it also ties back to what I was talking about earlier, is the DNA of games being the social experience, and virtual social experiences fulfill this kind of, we no longer, as humans, we don't really know our neighbors. We don't really have the functions of tribal communities that we did as primitive humans. And what's interesting to observe, and there's actually studies being done about this, is a lot of multiplayer gaming, cosplay, conventions are fulfilling a lot of those roles that are missing in society now. And especially that, like, now that less people are going to church and things like that, you're seeing a lot of other things filling that niche. So, those are all the great things about open development, but what are the challenges? Well, the schedule, it really messes with your schedule. So iterating with all that feedback takes way longer. And also staying on target, that's why you have, it's hard to see that, but that's Porkins, and it's like, stay on target. So vision versus feedback. So what that means is most of the time when you're in game development, the only people distracting you from your vision of what you want to make is like marketing and maybe some executives. But when you're doing this open development where you've got like thousands of players in your game while you're still building it, they're all telling you you're doing it wrong, or they're telling you, I like this thing, or I don't like this thing. And so staying to your vision and staying on target is a lot harder when you're getting all this constant feedback. Another big challenge is educating users on early development. And not just early development, but products that are not yet done. So turns out people don't have a lot of experience interacting with products that are not finished. Most people are used to buying things that are done, except maybe for the very first iPhone. But for the most part, people are used to buying things that are done. You don't buy a TV with that can't switch channels. Like everyone is used to buying finished products, and so educating users on how to interact with something that's not finished, turns out that takes a lot of time, and it's very hard, and it's quite a challenge. Steam has these long explanations of like, what is early access and what does that mean, and no one reads any of that. And we put in all caps we literally on our Steam early access page we have in all caps, do not buy this game. Like literally it says, do not buy this game unless you want something that's still being developed, etc. And but still they ignore all that, and then they give us anyway. The other thing that's really challenging about it is what I call backward scheduling. So there's a lot of stuff that you usually don't do in development until the very end. And one of the, for instance, usually don't do tutorials until the very end of a project because you wait to do tutorials after you're finished with the game because you want to do the tutorials when all the game systems are finished because you won't change them after that. But turns out if you put a game in front of players without any of these tutorials, then they don't know how to play the game, and they give you really shitty reviews. The other thing that you usually wait to do at the very end of a project is optimization, because again, content will change. So, for instance, if you go and optimize all the player outfits, and then you decide, oh, you know what? We don't like having spikes on any of the outfits. And then you go remove all the spikes on all the outfits. All the optimization you did on the player outfits has to be completely redone. So, but again, it turns out if you don't do any optimizations and you put the game in front of players, it runs real slow. And they give you bad feedback. Speaking of bad feedback, another big challenge is perception. And getting discouraged by negativity. So giving a product to players when it's not done, or it's broken, or it's they will give you really lots of negative feedback, and it's easy to get discouraged. You will spend a lot of time crying in the shower, which I do. And Another big challenge is expectation versus reality. So, and which is why I got No Man's Sky up there. But it's a catch-22. You have to, especially for those of us who crowdfund, like in order to get people to give you money to fund the product, you have to give them a pretty exact list of what the product will be. Which, when you're developing internally, like when it's just you and your bosses, you can go back to your bosses later and you say, hey, you know that idea where players were going to see each other? That's just not going to work. We're going to just cut that. But when you tell the public that, you cannot go back on that. You're locked in. And if you go back on that, they're going to come burn your house down. and so, like, whatever expectation you set at the beginning, you don't get to change. You don't get to edit. And that's probably one of the biggest pitfalls of like open development and crowdfunding and this expectation versus reality is like one of the things that makes great art and great entertainment is the ability to edit. It's the ability to like take the things that aren't quite working and put them on the cutting room floor. But you don't get to do that when you're out in front of players and you promise them all this stuff. You don't get to cut the stuff that's just not quite working. Because you promised it. And what all that can lead to is what I call the negative feedback black hole, where all that negative feedback just sort of feeds in on itself and just creates this sort of spiraling black hole that just gets worse and worse. And so that's the kind of downside to open development. So if I haven't scared you of open development, you don't know what's wrong. Now, it's not all terrible. There's some fun stuff. So we have some fun with when they make us cry. So, there's the good and the bad. So the people who are constantly telling us everything's great, those are the fanboys who are drinking the Kool-Aid. But then we have this other joke. So whenever we do something that the players don't like, they have a phrase that they like to use, which is a slap in the face. So, and what that amounts to is, like the most recent one we did was we nerfed taming. And the nerf to taming is a slap in the face to all tamers. And so we have this running joke of whenever we're going to change something that we know is going to piss people off, how long is it going to take them, like how many words or pages in is it going to take before someone says slap in the face? And so whenever we do that, we have a little bet we put on, like, how long does it take to get to slap in the face? And then finally, it's my celebrity catchphrase is "Don't lawyer me, bro," which I stole from "Don't tase me, bro." And that's basically because we see what one of players' favorite things to do is it's back to the promises thing. Is they'll find like a video, and they'll like at 2 minutes and 36 seconds you said blank. And so my response to that is don't lawyer me. Like, we're in open development, things are going to change, and that goes back to the sausages thing. Like, I want to have a conversation with you guys. I want to have the ability to like brainstorm, and so don't lawyer me when things change. So don't lawyer me, bro, is my celebrity catchphrase. Now, with all that said, all this scary stuff, we live in an amazing time. Like, we live in this amazing time of distribution and developer democratization. Like, and it's not just about like funding, which is a lot of what I talked about today. Like, we have Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but we have like Unity and Unreal. So like where you have the engines that you can build stuff with, and distribution platforms like Steam and the App Store. But you're even seeing crazy stuff with hardware like Raspberry Pi, where it's not just about building games and software, but like being able to like iterate and build with hardware too. And so now is an amazing time to be a developer. So it's really exciting. So I had some other stuff, but I want to zoom through because I want to give you guys some touch. I'm going to zoom through these real quick. So these are some of my design principles. Play games. Like, if you want to make games, If any of you are interested in going to games, you got to play games. You can't go into games if you're not playing games. Make something you want. I put that slightly in quotes because you're not always going to get to do that. So you have to sometimes role play who you is. But for the most part, make what you want. Gameplay first. Define your game. Compulsion loop. Worry about the rest after. Understand and build for your audience. Intrinsic. Okay, I'm just going to look on it. Intrinsic rewards are greater than extrinsic rewards. And what I mean by that is intrinsic, it means that the game itself should be fun. Extrinsic rewards are things like levels, badges, gear, things like that. Those are not nearly as important as the actual gameplay itself. Does that make sense? So always make the game itself fun, and the rewards are less important than that. Okay? Making the game should be fun. If you're not having fun making it, your game won't be fun. Iterate and fail fast. Evolution is at least is greater or at least equal to revolution. So old is new. It's you don't have to evolve or invent everything. Evolving, evolving is just as good as revolution. So, a couple of recommended reading. The lead designer for my first game, Ultima Online, a guy named Raph Koster, wrote this brilliant book called A Theory of Fun. If you're making games, you have to read this book, Theory of Fun. If you're making any kind of entertainment, you have to read this other book, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And you're going to hate me for this, but I recommend you read both of them in print. I know. It's a book. It's physical. Oh, icky. It's physical. But they are much better experiences as physical because of the way they're laid out and the images in them. Both of them are really quick reads. Understanding Comics is actually a graphic novel. These books are freaking amazing. Here's my contact info. You really can contact me. I mean it. If you have questions. And speaking of, we have 15 minutes for questions. I tried to go faster, but we have time for questions. Don't be shy. Yes? What was the question? So the question was, how did my major impact my career? Okay, so my major was theater. How did it impact my career? So my major was about entertainment, and I would say that games are entertainment. My theater degree was about entertainment, they were surprisingly similar. I mean, the only thing that my degree didn't have for me was technical knowledge about computers, but I had that on my own. So I think that I think mainly it was about knowing about entertainment and the principles of entertaining people. I think that's what the main benefit I got out of my theater degree for games. Okay, interesting question. So the question is, what is a work day for me like? Let's see. So a work day for me is I'll spend a little bit of time in the morning. I'll get on the forums. I will click the What's New button. So there's literally a What's New button, and that sorts for me what are the latest posts that I haven't looked at. And I'll sort of scan those and say, do I need to look at any of those? On average, probably 10-15% of those are ones that I really need to look at and or respond to. And I'll spend probably, depending on how much is on fire there, I'll spend 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour on that. Then I'll spend some time working on the weekly update. And then I'll probably have a design session about like a game system or a piece of content. So Yesterday, it was working on the agriculture system and how people were going to gather water and how we were going to indicate whether you had watered your crops or not. Then stand-ups, which are 3 10-minute stand-ups. So that's 30 minutes of stand-ups. Then let's see what else. Reviewing content. So like I had to look at like a house, a couple of houses that were being built. I needed to look at a map. I needed to look at a piece of armor that was being built. I needed to go over some recipes for the cooking system that were being done. And then a conversation about a convention that was coming up and a promotion that we were doing for them. So that's a typical day.
So what's the title of that?
That my job?
Yeah.
Executive producer. Or as I jokingly call it, useless overhead line item in the budget. Because I'm not making anything. So that's my joke is like everyone makes stuff and I just sort of run around like going, yeah. Or, ugh. All right, next. Scanning. Everyone's like, what, you get out 15 minutes early? If I don't ask a question, I can leave. Yes?
Do you or your team have a practice or like a habit aside from game production that you feel affects game production?
Do we, a website for reference, you mean? Like our, that's a great question. I don't have a single recommendation. I mean, we have gone through several methodologies before. So I mentioned that we're agile, but we don't use Scrum. We're agile in the sense that we have sprints, but we don't do boards and stickies, but we do sprints. We have a backlog. We sort of have burn downs, mainly in my head. I don't really have a good reference because I sort of I've made my own sort of agile version in my head. It's kind of a mashup of like lean and agile and ditching all the paper stuff. We use Jira as our software. Yeah. Yes, in the back.
So you've worked on a lot of games and stuff, but you said you also grew up playing games. I want to know, do you spend more time playing games that you didn't work on?
The question is, what do I spend games that I did or didn't work on?
What games do you usually end up playing on your free time?
I play other people's games mostly in my free time. And I play games a lot. So you notice that was like my number one on my list, which is play games. And now when I'm at work, I play the game that I'm working on now. But when I go home, I play other games because I want to see what's happening in the space. Like right now, I'm playing Fallout 4, Elder Scrolls Online, Knights of the Old Republic Online, Hearthstone. Those are the games that are in rotation for me. I'm playing Elder Scrolls Online and Knights of the Old Republic for research. I'm playing Fallout 4 for fun, and I'm playing Hearthstone for fun. So, but I literally play a game. I play games every single day. And if you're not playing games every single day and you're a game developer, you're in the wrong business. Yeah, what else? Yes?
So you mentioned when you went to game testing, you never really thought about the back end of game development and stuff.
Yeah.
As a kid growing up, what were your early experiences with the early
Yeah, so the question was, what was my early experience with computers? So my earliest experience was with a TRS-80. In 6th grade, we had a computer lab, and we had a bunch of TRS-80s with cassette drives, and we were learning BASIC. I also took at the college they had a kids programming course where we learned Fortran. Again, but I never thought of it as a career. I just thought of it as a cool, quirky hobby I don't know why I never thought of it as a career. I mean, mainly because nobody else I knew. I had one friend who was into it, but like no one else we knew. I mean, it's Louisiana, so no one else we knew was into technology like that. So maybe that was why. Also, my friend had a Timex Sinclair 1000, which was one of the very first home computers too, and so that was kind of my first experience with that. So, but I never pursued it much. Like it kind of started and stopped there. I didn't take any computer programming courses in college. Like I did in middle school, a little bit in high school, but I didn't pursue it into college. I kind of dropped after that. Yes.
What sort of legal obstacles do you go through game development? Like, if it's accidentally too close to another video game in terms of gameplay, or about some weird game about characters?
So the question is, what kind of legal obstacles do we face in games? Like if we're too close to a gameplay or character, you have to be I've never actually ever experienced that. You have to, the only place that really happens is really more about technology. Like it almost never happens on the creative or design side. In fact, I've never seen it. The only place it usually happens is either direct intellectual property infringement. So like, for instance, Marvel sued NCSoft over City of Heroes over things like one of the superpowers your heroes could have was claws, and they were like, no, that's too close to Wolverine's claws. And so I think we changed it from 3 to 2 claws. Right, and so okay, there's happy now, but most of the time it's patent. It's people trying to claim that I have a patent on all characters being drawn on a computer screen for a game. Like really? And there's people. I mean, literally that is a patent. There's a guy who has that patent, and who's gone around suing basically every video game company who says I have the patent on drawing moving humanoid characters on the screen for a video game. And it's well, really? I don't think so. So that's most of the legal actions revolve around technology patents like that. It's very rarely about, it's almost never about game mechanics. In fact, I've never seen any happen about game mechanics that I know of. Yes?
At what point would you, or what would have to happen for you to say the game's done, it's perfect?
The one I'm working on right now?
Yes.
So our criteria for going to commercial launch is that we fulfilled the list of things we promised during the Kickstarter. We are getting consistently 30 frames per second, and load times between scenes are less than 5 to 10 seconds. So those are our 3 criteria. All right, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more. Yes?
Can you give sort of a range as to, how long your different projects have lasted, what a speech piece you've been on in the past?
So the question was, can I give a range of how long the various projects that I've worked on? So my very first one, Ultima Online, took us 2 years. Tabula Rasa took us 6.5. The mobile games that I did at Disney took about 6 months, and Shroud, we're on our 3rd year, and at the end of the day, we'll probably be 3.5, 4, maybe before commercial launch. So it's kind of all over the place. All right, I think I got time for one more. Who wants it? Yes.
What are the steps you took?
What are the steps I took? What? What are the steps I took to be an executive producer? I was a very noisy jerk who wanted to constantly make things better. Like, I just wanted things to be more organized. That was kind of it. And I read lots of books about management, like Mythical Man Month, and books like that. All right, thank you, everybody.